Hi guys, this is Omer from MMOTPS, and I'm doing something a little bit different today, something a lot of people have been asking for quite a while, a top 10 MMO shooter video. And this top 10 will include both FPS and third-person shooters, and the top 10 rankings were determined by user ratings on MMOTPS, so the rankings are determined entirely by visitors on MMOTPS. So it should be largely unbiased. Anyway, as you can probably tell, at least some of you can probably tell, the first game that we're going to take a look at, which is number 10 on our list, is K.O.S. Secret Operations, Kill on Sight, and it's published by Y&K Interactive, also called Don't Blink, and the game was released in the US in late 2009, and is called Sting in South Korea. Those who have played K.O.S. Secret Operations probably noticed how similar it was to Counter-Strike Source, and that's because the game utilized the exact same game engine, which is called the Valve Source Engine. The game is pretty high-end graphics for sure, but the player base isn't that high. Up next, guys, for the number 9 slot, Operation 7 from a company called Nexon, and as you can see, it's a 3D tactical MMO shooter, and not surprisingly, most games on this list will be tactical modern-day shooters. The game is available in Korea as well by a company called M-Game, I think that's the developer, as the same name, Operation 7. The game originally launched in North America in late 2008, and compared to some of the other games on this list, it's not that popular, but it does have a pretty sizable player base. And as you can see from the video, players can also kind of lean over and shoot, which is kind of unique to the game because not that many other FPS games have that leaning feature. Next up, guys, for the number 8 slot is Combat Arms from Nexon. The game launched in both Korea and North America in 2008 and launched in EU in early 2009. The game is actually immensely popular and easily one of the most popular free-to-play FPS games out there. I would actually argue it is the most popular free-to-play FPS game with over 4 million registered users. Now, in its core, the game isn't too different than the other modern-day tactical FPS games out there, but the game does have a huge variety of weapons, and other customization options. I would actually argue one of the game's biggest strengths is the fact that the game is actually updated very often with new weapons, new maps, and things of that nature. I mean, regardless of what you think about the game, it's pretty obvious that Nexon cares about it, and they do a good job updating it all. Up next, guys, for the all-elusive number 7 slot is WolfTeam from Area Games, and the game is actually developed by a company called Softnix. Oddly enough, the game is available both on Area Games as well as the developer's own website. Now, as you guessed it, and as you can see, it's a 3D tactical MMOFPS game set in modern times, though the game does have one really unique aspect which kind of helps it differentiate itself, and that's the ability for players to turn into wolves, as you just saw right now, and you can turn yourself into a powerful melee-oriented wolf, which is basically kind of like using your melee weapon, but instead you transform, and that gives you bonus HP too. It's kind of a little twist in the genre, but the game is largely just another regular 3D tactical FPS game, though the mechanics are pretty solid, reliable, and consistent. Now, the game is nowhere near as popular as Combat Arms, but then again, really no other game is, because that's probably the most popular free-to-play FPS, but it still has a pretty sizable community, which is always good. Next up, guys, for the number 6 slot, an extremely popular FPS game called Crossfire by ZSGames. The game was developed by a Korean company called Smilegate, and as you can already tell by the gameplay, it looks a lot like Combat Arms and Operation 7, but I think what sets the Crossfire a bit apart is its large player base. I mean, the game is a big player base, though not as large as Combat Arms, but what really makes the game fun is its simple, solid gameplay mechanics. I mean, in FPS games, they're all very similar, but so what makes them different are their subtle gameplay mechanics. I guess Crossfire is a very reliable game, and it's a simple and fun game too. And the game's graphics aren't super high-end either, which means the game is actually available to a lot of players, so you don't need a super high-end PC to actually play it. Crossfire was released in Korea originally back in 2007, but it came to North America in early 2009. The game has a whole bunch of gameplay modes as well, which kind of makes the game fun too. There's a lot of things to do. I've personally played Crossfire a decent amount, and it's still a pretty fun game that I'll play on and off. Next up, for the number 5 slot, Battlefield Heroes from Electronic Arts. It's actually the first Western-developed game to make it on this list, and as you can tell by the graphics already, Battlefield Heroes is a lighthearted, fun FPS game. Actually, it's a third-person shooter, my bad. But if you've ever played the Battlefield series of games, it's very similar to other Battlefield games. There's a large map, plenty of vehicles, and a lot of chaos and fun. But the game's graphics are very cartoony and lighthearted, and the trailers are always awesome because they have this awesome music in the background with this pro whistling. Battlefield Heroes is one of the first free-to-play games made by Electronic Arts, but I think it's a really fun one. It's a game I've been playing on and off since it originally released back in 2009, and one of the game's more interesting aspects is its actual RPG elements. I mean, it's one of the first few shooting games with actual RPG elements. As you play the game, you gain experience, and depending on what class you play in the game, you can actually level up certain abilities, which enhance your character, which is kind of cool. I also really like the cartoony graphics. I don't know why, it's doing it for me. Oh man, guys, next up, Genesis AD for our top 4. It's actually number 4. And Genesis AD is a 3D sci-fi themed MMO shooter, MMOFPS shooter. And I think what makes Genesis AD original is the fact that it's actually sci-fi themed. Plus, it actually has a lot of cool, interesting abilities like jumping and strafe. Jumping is an interesting ability, but there's boosting where you can jump across the entire map. You can actually cloak as well. So there's a lot of little interesting gameplay elements which help sets the game apart. The game is published by good old EG, which actually publishes a lot of FPS games. The game has really great visuals, definitely one of the better looking free-to-play FPS games out there. I think it's a game that's definitely well worth checking out, especially if you've played a lot of tactical FPS games and you're getting kind of bored of the whole like tactical modern theme genre. This at least is a bit sci-fi themed, and that's always awesome. Genesis AD is also one of those games that I actually still play on and off. Number 3, guys, Project Blackout from SG Interactive, formerly called Entrive. The game began its open beta in late 2010, but fully released in 2011. And you can see the gameplay video I'm playing right now is my awesome video I put on my gameplay video for Project Blackout. My chain killer run, I went 12-0. It's a game that I still play on and off pretty randomly because it's still a lot of fun, and the gameplay mechanics do feel a tad bit different, and it's pretty surprising to see this game on the top 3, especially considering how new it is. The game has pretty solid gameplay mechanics and also pretty nice visuals. It's a game I think is worth checking out if you like FPS games. And I still remember having this awesome kill streak run. I was 12-0, as I said. I'm about to go own that guy over there, and boom, another guy shows up. Boom, he's about to go die over there too, and I know he's gonna come out right there, and boom, he's dead over there too. And I still go for a little bit longer, but anyway, let's go to number 2. And number 2 is S4 League from Alaplaya. Now, this isn't an FPS game, but it's a third-person shooter, and it's a game that's very similar to Guns of Duel. It's a really fun game that's also sci-fi themed. The sci-fi theme is definitely pretty interesting, and the game's graphics and stuff are pretty anime inspired, but they actually work really well. I actually like the really bright graphics in the game, plus the fast-paced action. Now, the game itself launched in Korea back in 2006, but launched in Europe and North America through Alaplaya in 2008. And it's a game, like I mentioned, very similar to Guns of Duel, so if you did like Guns of Duel, you definitely want to give S4 League a try. Now, another reason I actually like S4 League is because it's a lot different than all the other FPS games out there. I mean, the game is really fast-paced and different than other FPS games out there, plus it's third-person, which makes it different instantly. And I should also mention, the game itself is awesome in-game music. The music and the soundtrack in S4 League is definitely worth listening to if you haven't heard it. Next up, and oh man, number 1, Alliance of Valiant Arms, also called AVA, published by EG. The game was released back in 2009 and has awesome graphics. And I say awesome graphics because out of all the FPS games out there, Alliance of Valiant Arms is definitely one of the best looking, if not the best looking visually. And the gameplay itself also feels a tad bit different too, which is always good. The game has a good variety of weapons, good variety of maps, and a ton of stuff to keep you occupied. And I should also mention, Alliance of Valiant Arms handedly took the number 1 spot. The game's average rating was a 4.11 on MMOTPS out of a whopping 1,598 votes as of this video. The number 2 and number 3 slots were both very close, while Alliance of Valiant Arms was well ahead over there with a 4.11. Now, out of all the games in this top 10 list, personally, I do like Alliance of Valiant Arms the best, but there are a lot of fun games on this list, and if you do like playing FPS games, you probably want to check most of them out. Anyway, guys, I do want to emphasize again, this top 10 list was ranked entirely by user votes on MMOHut.com. I did agree personally with most of the top 10 ratings, but a few of them I did have my own disagreements with. I'm pretty sure some of you did as well. If you don't agree with the list, just, post your own comments below and tell me what you think is your top 10 and what game you think should be number 1. Anyway, guys, that's it for this top 10 video. If you guys do want to play any of the games on this list or just learn more about them, head on over to MMOHut.com. Anyway, guys, this is Omer, signing off.